on this episode of the China Chronicles. Now, I was wondering about this, I think, by almost everybody who spoke to me about, spending time in China. Hey, be careful, be very careful about the food. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Game Changers podcast. My name is Censorship, and it's a privilege and pleasure to be here with you as usual. This is the start of a new series. I'm calling it the China Chronicles, where I feature and look at my time in Beijing over the next 4 months. Now, this brand new series, like I said, will be documenting my time here in Beijing. And I will give real, unfiltered insights into what life is really like in China. There's a lot being spoken about China these days in the news, particularly with the tariffs by President Donald Trump on China and the retaliatory tariffs by China on the US as well. So there's a lot about China in the news. There's a lot of concern about what is going on in China. But many people don't know what life is like in China, what really happens behind these walls. Right? So now that I am behind these walls, I can, probably give you a little bit more insight into what is really going on. So let's start up by speaking about why I am here in China to begin with. I mean, why did I leave St. Lucia to come to this part of the world? Well, I am here as part of the China International Press Program. Now, this program brings together over 100 journalists from across the world, different regions. So we have Africa, we have Caribbean, we have Latin America, across the world, to come together to experience life in China for a period, and to gain a deeper understanding as to what life is like in China. We are also scheduled for some lectures on China's socio-economic development, diplomacy, culture, science, and technology. So we are going to be learning a little bit more in depth as to what life is like and what the psychology of China is like, really, from a Chinese perspective. So it's not just hearsay, but it's more direct from the source. Being journalists will also be receiving some training in Chinese journalism, or the Chinese version of journalism. And we'll be spending some time with Chinese media outlets. We are supposed to have some symposiums. We will be spending some time with our colleagues in China just to really understand what they go through on a daily basis. We'll be also speaking to some people from government departments, some major enterprises. China is basically the hub for innovation and technology in the world in terms of, really manufacturing these items. So we'll be spending some time at these organizations. We'll be having think tanks and just having interesting discussions in general to really, like I said, get into the psyche of what life in China is truly like. We'll also get to cover some major events happening in China. During this period, there are certain events that are supposed to happen, some sports events. For those of you who don't know, I am actually the sports journalist with St. Lucia Times. So we'll be having some sports events. We'll also be looking at some major symposiums that we're supposed to have. Latin America and the Caribbean is supposed to have a symposium. There's supposed to be one for the African group as well. So some major events in China coming up very soon. So let's speak about how I got here. How did I even end up in China? What was the process like to get here? So I would have applied for this program. My news agency, Censorship Times, would have put my name up for consideration, and then I will have had to apply to get here. Would have applied for my Chinese visa, and I would have gotten through with that partly. But then I still needed to get my visa stamped. I still needed to get it approved before I got here. So that was a crazy part of my journey. So I left St. Lucia on Tuesday, April 1st, and took a short flight to Barbados, a 30-minute flight. Barbados is pretty close to St. Lucia, to get my passport stamped with an official Chinese visa. St. Lucia no longer has diplomatic ties with China, mainland China. They do have diplomatic ties with Taiwan, which is another area of contention, something that we probably will be discussing later on in this series, as to the psyche and, well, how China really views Taiwan. Because in mainland China's eyes, Taiwan is still very much, Taiwan is just another province, but Taiwan sees themselves as different, and they really want to be established as an independent state, independent of mainland China. So that's a pretty interesting topic to speak about. Yeah, but like I said, I had to go to Barbados to get my passport stamped because St. Lucia no longer has direct ties with mainland China. So I got my passport stamped, and then I took a 9-hour flight from Barbados to London Heathrow. I spent most of my Wednesday in London. I didn't venture too far away from the airport. Spent most of my time in the terminal, getting some work done, just doing some sightseeing as well, stretching my legs, just preparing for my other flight from London Heathrow to China. And I got that flight at about 8 o'clock London time. So I would have hopped on to Air China, took another 9-hour flight from London Heathrow, and got into China. Got into Beijing, to be specific. So I arrived in Beijing at about 1 p.m. Chinese time. So that is 1 a.m. Caribbean time. So it was afternoon here and it was early morning in the Caribbean. So I got here obviously tired, excited, jet lagged, but very excited still. So week 1 has finished. I'm recording this on Sunday. I'm just about to tackle my second week here, and there were several things that stood out to me so far already. After resting on Friday, so I got here last week Thursday. After resting on Friday and basically throughout the weekend, so rest on Friday, rested on Saturday, rested on Sunday. My week really began in earnest on Monday. And boy, we've had a packed schedule so far, and we're going to have an even more packed schedule going forward. To begin the week, we had a couple of lectures, including topics on China's development. And among the key talking points was a lecture by Professor Wang Yue. I most likely butchered that name, but he really spoke about China's development from a socialist standpoint. Now, those of you who don't know, China is a communist state, and it takes the socialist model of development. He really spoke about how China believes that this is the best approach, and he showcased how 40 years ago, China was one of the poorest countries in the world, and now 40 years later, in 2025, it's among the richest. He says that this development is largely to do with the model that they've taken up, and how they've gone about their development. So that was pretty interesting. But what really stood out to me during this week thus far were the cultural activities and the outings that we were part of. On Tuesday, we did a Chinese painting activity. We painted pandas. It's an iconic symbol of China. If you think about China, you think about bamboo, you think about pandas, you think about several things, the Great Wall. So we painted pandas in the Chinese painting style. Now, I need to say this for the forefront. I am no big artist. I am no great painter. But it looked like something, it at least looks like a panda when I was finished with it. So that was pretty interesting, and I enjoyed that experience. So on Wednesday, we visited IQIYI, one of the fastest growing streaming companies in China. It is often referred to as the Netflix of China. So it's basically a media company in China. And we got to see really the insides behind what makes the company tick. We saw basically how they started from nothing, and now they've transformed themselves into a global brand, not just in China but across the world. So they have so many products. They are streaming products, they have games, they have so much media related things. One of the things that really stood out to me was the fact that they focused on one piece of IP and how they can utilize it and transform it into various products. So let's say, for example, they would have purchased the rights from a book, right? They would take the book and then will create video games of the content of that book, and then they'll also create a movie of the content of that book. So how they utilize one piece of IP and then transforming it into a series of various pieces of content. I think that was pretty interesting to me, and I really liked how they went about doing that, because it that is something that I am trying for Game Changers. So you utilize a set of content and then you repurpose it in different ways. And it was really inspiring to see how they would take something and then transform it and duplicate it. And this is basically the Chinese mindset. They try to squeeze as much out of something as they can. And that is what I'm learning from them so far. On Thursday, we toured the Museum of the Communist Party of China. Now, that was a really eye opening day. So, we got to the compound during the day in the morning, and wow, I mean, just the scale of the property. The building is massive. It's a massive structure. I mean, I took a photo outside of it just to show how big the building is. And inside is it's really awe-inspiring just to see the journey that they have taken from the imperial China all the way to what China is like now. And the technology inside the museum itself is pretty groundbreaking. There's a cinema experience that really stood out to me. I think they call that 4D. So you could actually so there's a splash of water and you can actually feel the water. You sit down in front of a screen and then you move up and down. It made me feel a little bit nauseous afterwards, but it was truly a intriguing experience. It was an experience that was truly one of a kind, and I learned a lot. I'm somebody who loves history and loves looking behind the scenes of what makes something what it is today. And for me, I mean, that was a highlight of my week. It was really inspiring. On Friday, we participated in the art of seal carving. Now, when I heard seal carving, I had no idea what that was, but I did some research, and then when I got there, it was confirmed. So, seal carving is basically the creating of Chinese stamps. So basically, you get a piece of stone and then you have to carve a symbol into the stone, and then you dip it in a sort of ink and then you stamp it. And again, I'm not a very artsy guy, but that was pretty interesting. I mean, it looked like the symbol when I was done with it. And again, it's really pretty interesting to see Chinese culture in the works. It really is interesting to see how they go about doing these things. These art forms are hundreds of years old and it's still being utilized and still being done today. Just seeing how they really care about the small things was really inspiring to me. Some of the key takeaways this week came in the forms of cultural shocks. Now, there were both good surprises and not so good surprises, I should say. The first of the surprises was the busyness of the people. Now, even during the Queen Ming Festival, that's a festival that happened when I just arrived. It's a 3-day public holiday that honors the lives and legacies of ancestors. So what they'll have is grave cleaning, they will have kite flying just to honor the ancestors that were passed. It's also the official entrance of spring, the season of spring. And, it's a really family oriented day. But even on that day, businesses were very much open. Traffic was running as if it was a normal work day. People were still very busy getting stuff done. And it opened my eyes to really understand that, the Chinese do not stop. Nothing stops China from moving unless it's maybe like a natural disaster or something. So when they actually cannot do what they want to do, nothing stops the Chinese. They get stuff done. They are very business oriented. They have this philosophy of going for what they want and being really aggressive as at getting their work done. It doesn't matter what time it is. It doesn't matter what period it is. They get what they need to do done. And this is very different from the laid back West Indian culture that I'm used to. St. Lucians and Caribbean people in general. I mean, once it's a holiday, nothing really gets done. But in China, they don't really take days off. So I don't see it as a negative or a positive. I just find it intriguing as to how they go about living their lives, and was pretty interesting to me. So the busyness of the people really stood out to me. The next thing was the food. Now, I was wondered about this, I think, by almost everybody who spoke to me about, spending time in China. Hey, be careful, be very careful about the food. And so far, I don't really have complaints, to be honest. Now, it kind of helps that I do a lot of the cooking myself, so I cook for myself. That has been a challenge, but I mean, it's coming along. But even the food that I've purchased has not really upset me too much. I've had Chinese dumplings for the first time. Let me tell you, top tier, top tier food. Those Chinese dumplings, I definitely will be getting them again. Everything else has been pretty good. I mean, I hope that continues. The last thing I want to deal with is a bout of food poisoning while I'm here. And I've enjoyed the food so far. Can't complain about that at all. Another point that stood out to me is the pollution. Now, many of you would have heard about the pollution, particularly in Beijing. And the reality is that the air pollution in this area is real. You can feel it when you walk the street, particularly when you come from the Caribbean, where the air is a lot cleaner. We are close to, I guess, beaches, so you have that sea breeze, that cool, clean air. You can feel the difference when you walk in the city. So yes, the air pollution is a real thing. I mean, I had to eventually get a mask. It protects me both from the industrial pollution and also the pollen in the air, because like I said, it's springtime, right? So that is a reality. The air pollution is a real thing. However, on the flip side of the pollution topic, the streets in Beijing are very, very clean. The streets are basically spotless. The level of street cleaning is pretty interesting. Every time I look outside, so we're on a compound, regardless of what time of day or night it seems like somebody is doing some level of cleaning, some level of you know making the place look spotless for visitors and for people in general. And I think that's something that we as Caribbean people need to take upon ourselves. We as St. Lucians in particular, because I mean, if you just think about what our city looks like in terms of cleanliness, I mean, we can do a lot better in terms of proper disposal of garbage. And you quickly realize here that it is a culture, it is a part of a culture here to take care of the environment, to not litter. You know, you don't see many bins around Beijing, interestingly. However, people dispose of their garbage properly. So they will hold on to garbage and then they will throw it away when the time comes, maybe when they get to their home, or when you do see a red bin on the street, right? They would dispose of their garbage. So I think that's something that we can take on ourselves and really focus on as people who want to see our own countries develop. We could start off by engaging in anti-pollution drives, because I think that is something that we really, really can do better at. It's something that is very simple. It really helps our environment, particularly in flood-prone areas. We have very clogged gutters back home in St. Lucia, and it can cause some serious issues. I'm almost certain that Beijing does not have those issues because they dispose of their garbage properly and they put it in the right locations. They are so The bins that you do see, they are areas for recycling and general waste as well. So just the proper disposal of garbage, it was a real eye opener for me, and it's something that I think that we definitely need to take on for ourselves. Now, one of the biggest challenges that I've faced so far is the challenge with the internet and the censorship. Now, if you don't know, China has what is often referred to as the Great Firewall. So it's basically something that restricts many Western websites. So anything Google related is restricted in China. Anything Meta related is restricted in China. Everything from Gmail to Instagram is restricted in China. Now, if you're tech savvy, you can get around these things. You can use a VPN, which is a virtual private network, to get around some of those restrictions, but even that is heavily restricted and is very regulated by the government, by the Chinese firewall. So this has been a challenge for me, particularly as somebody in the media. Communications is my thing. This communications is very, very necessary for me. So for me to be able to go out and to share the information that I need to share, I had to take several other steps that I would not normally take. But so this has been a challenge for me thus far. But it's something that you can work around, like I said, if you have the right technical skills or you have the right people around you with the technical skills to help you out. But you can certainly manage if you know what you're doing. Now there are some Chinese apps which give some access to Western content. You know, you can get some spots um on some Chinese apps, albeit the commentary would be in Chinese. Um, and that takes a lot of navigating. The app itself is in Chinese. Some of them you can translate. There are various apps that translate from Chinese to English. One of the main apps that is utilized here is an app called WeChat, where it's basically a messaging app, but it's so much more than that. You can pay for items through WeChat. You can stream through WeChat. We can do so many things through WeChat. So it is utilized for that, and it is a standard app. It's an app that you need to download before you get here. So, like I said, there are ways around the technology challenges. However, it can be a serious challenge. Another thing that stood out to me was the infrastructure and the vehicles. Now, infrastructure here is on the next level. I mean, there are skyscrapers everywhere in Beijing. Everywhere you go, there are skyscrapers. And the roads are pretty well developed. The public transportation is top tier. And, it is really, you can tell that you're in a developed, or well, they would say a developing country. There also are a lot of electric vehicles here. So even though the place is quite busy, it's pretty quiet, and therefore you have to stay very alert when you're crossing the road or you're around traffic, because you won't hear something coming. And also mopeds, motorbikes, scooters, bicycles, and human beings all have basically the same rules when crossing the road. So you would see a scooter driving past you on a pedestrian crossing, and then because it's electric, you will not hear it coming. So you have to be very, very alert and very aware. Now the beautiful thing about the Chinese people is that they're very accommodating. So if you are walking, it's unlikely they will move around you. They'll find a way to go around you, but you still have to be very, very alert. And I mean, it's a general rule to look both ways when crossing the street, but you would definitely, definitely have to do it. Another challenge for me has been the unpredictability of the weather. I came here in probably the most unpredictable season. It's the springtime. Temperatures can be erratic, might be the best way to say. Um, at times it can be pretty chilly outside, and then within hours it can be Caribbean warm, if not warmer than Caribbean air, very, very quickly. So that change on in the weather has been rough on my body. You could probably hear from my voice. I do have a cough and the cold. I am managing it with Caribbean remedies. You know, your ginger, your lemon, your garlic teas. So I am working on it, and hopefully when I record my next episode, I will sound a lot better. But I'm okay, not struggling too much in any way. It's just an annoying cough that is on its way out. So hopefully, like I said, I will be a lot better going forward. So yes, the weather has been a challenge, but I am working around it. So hopefully I could get. So that has been my first week in Beijing. Like I said, this is just the start of what I expect to be an extended series to really open your eyes as to what is happening behind this curtain. I really do hope that you guys would like and subscribe as usual, but also comment and let me know some of the things that you might want to know, some of the things that you might want to see during my time in Beijing. As always, Game Changers is a platform that emphasizes on learning and growth and development of our listeners and our viewers. So I will do my best to showcase and to break down certain things for you. And let's engage in a conversation. Let's see how far we can take this content. I believe that this is probably the most important content that I have started working on over a period. So I do hope that you guys could enjoy it, but also more importantly that you will learn from it. Anyhow, this has been an interesting start to my time here in Beijing. As usual, like and subscribe and stay hungry, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.